What you are listening to now is our regularly scheduled IndyCar Report with Elijah Poe. Kind of seems like a breaking news podcast with the news of Will Power signing with Andretti Racing, but it's not just our regularly scheduled podcast. If there is any other big news, and we anticipate that there will be since there are some big open seats now, we will have special IndyCar reports with our thoughts on the news. I don't do this often enough. Thank you to the voice of the Carmel Greyhounds, Aaron Pittman, for this intro.
You're listening to the Central Indiana Sports Report with your host, Greg Mengels.
Welcome, IndyCar fans, to the Central Indiana Sports Report for the IndyCar Report with Elijah Poe. This is our regularly scheduled IndyCar report, Elijah, but it's almost like a special IndyCar report or a breaking news IndyCar report because it's just coming fast and furious. Last we talked, Will Power ended his relationship with Penske, or the other way around, and the rumor now is that he left on his own accord and Penske wanted him back, and so many other things have happened. Welcome, Elijah, and I guess start from the top.
Yeah, thanks for having me. It's definitely been an interesting few days after finishing up the 2025 season in Nashville. Kind of started with the silly season, knowing, these dominoes are going to fall whenever Will Power decides where he's going to go. And, having been confirmed in that number 26 seat now at Andretti, that Andretti team is looking very fierce. And it's also been announced that Colton Herta will move to the Cadillac Formula One team to be the test and development driver, with hopes of him getting to Formula One here in the future. Um, I'm not sure how he's going to do that. I think the most logical reason for Colton is going to be him going to Formula Two, which is definitely going to be weird for us IndyCar fans seeing him in a lesser category of racing. But that's
Yeah,
his dream to get to Formula One.
you know what, Elijah? That I call it JV racing. You know, NXT and the whatever the division's called in NASCAR now. But these are probably among the best handful of drivers in the world, particularly young drivers in the world, and it is a series full of talent, Elijah.
Yeah, I mean, no doubt. I think Colton said this and made this clear. This is a huge risk Colton is taking because, there's a very well chance that he could get over there and just completely fall flat on his face. But,
It's
testing
happened.
and testing Formula One cars and the tests he's run are say otherwise, but it's hard to say for sure until we actually see these cars on track. And it's unfortunate we're not going to be able to see him in a seat until maybe next March or February because, man, I think it's one of the most interesting things I've ever seen an IndyCar driver do. But credit for Colton for taking this massive, massive risk to follow his dream.
It's been done a few times over the year, not very often. Michael Andretti is probably the most notable. I don't want to use the word failure,
Yeah.
but failure.
Yeah.
If you include Juan Pablo Montoya, who's not an American but came through American racing, he was very successful in Formula One. So you just don't know. Of course, Mario Andretti set the standard. He went from IndyCar to winning world championships in Formula One, back to IndyCar, winning championships there, and then back to whatever he wanted to do. He was going to win championships. But yeah, for Colton Herta, if this is his dream, and as someone from Indiana, I don't understand it. I think that IndyCar is the place to be, but if he thinks Formula One is the place to be, this is a good move for him. So is it just Will Power sliding into that seat, we assume?
Yeah, Will Power's been signed for that seat, and I'm really interested to see how he is in those Andretti cars. Will Power's been so great in qualifying, especially on street and road courses. But now that he's in an Andretti on street and road courses, I can't imagine what some of those lap times are going to be like. And what an interesting move for him to kind of say, I think I'm ready to move on from Penske. And I listened to the Off Track podcast with Alexander Rossi and James Hinchcliffe, and From what I got from Will's interview, it really felt like, Will was just ready for a change of pace. He talked about that 2024 season where he won 3 races, and the Penske organization as a whole really didn't talk about him with his contract at all and shut stuff down. And so for him to kind of say, you know what, Penske, I'm going to do things on my own. I'm going to have a change of scene and go to another great race team. Good for Will Power.
Absolutely. And good for Penske. They got what they wanted to, I think, with Malukas moving into that seat. And I think they were ready to move on. I think the relationship was a little stale, like you said. And honestly, right now, Elijah, Andretti's ahead of Penske as far as an organization.
Yeah, and you're talking about Penske. Obviously, everybody knows what happens this year, 2025, and at the Indianapolis 500 when they fired their 3 most tenured and most executive members of Team Penske Racing. That organization has been really up in the air for this past year, and even though they've won a couple races in 2025, I think every IndyCar fan can definitively say this team is just different than it's been in years past.
Even before he signed. And I was really surprised how fast it happened, Elijah. And I was actually kind of surprised it happened because it made too much sense. And anytime I think something makes too much sense, it never happens. But they did not take long to make that happen. And that is a perfect pairing, I think, as we said. And he will be a contender going forward. Maybe not a championship contender necessarily, but contender week after week, and particularly at the 500.
Absolutely. And you get willpower in any competitive car, and it's hard not to see him at least win one race a year.
Yeah.
Really, it is. And I'll be interested to see who steps up into that 12 car at Penske. We've said Malukas all season, but I also I also think Penske is really considering. I can't say this obviously, but I feel like they would be stupid not to consider VK as well, who's had just an incredible year at Delcoin Racing. And even if it is Malukas or VK, I think it's the right. The I think they're both great picks no matter what. I think VK obviously has a little bit more experience. I think you know what you're getting with VK.
Yes.
Where David Malukas kind of has that upside. That's
Sky's the
I mean,
limit.
being honest, his ceiling is really unknown right now.
Right. Sky's the limit as far as we know.
And I'll be interested. He obviously had a pretty successful year in that AJ Foyt car this year. Wasn't where I think he would want to be. Obviously not having a race win. I think he only had one podium. Is definitely not up to some of the Penske drivers that have come into that organization. You look at Joseph Newgarden, who's very accredited. Same thing with Scott McLaughlin. But regardless, I think Penske's ready for a change, and having any driver alongside Joseph Newgarden and Scott McLaughlin, you're going to have a good team.
I want to make a counter argument, Elijah, to the season that David Malukas had. When's the last time you heard a name as often of a driver who was driving for Foyt in a season? Kenny
Well, I would
Breck in
say
1998, maybe? It just doesn't happen that often. That team has not been very competitive, and this year they were. And I think you probably credit David Malukas with a lot of that because we saw how talented he was even before he got to Foyt.
that is true, but I do feel like a lot of the Foyt success in the last 2 years is because of how much they've relied on that Penske partnership. Obviously
Sure.
both teams are sharing a lot of information as a whole, but I also think David's name was brought up this year just because of how polarizing that willpower contract situation was as a whole. The only really thing that's been evading him is a win. And I think if you put him in that number 12 car, not really sure who it's going to be sponsored by. I think it's safe to assume Verizon's going to stick on that car. And I know Andretti hasn't come out with any sponsors yet. It's also safe to say it's still probably going to be the Gamebridge um, sponsorship. But regardless, man, both those drivers are in such a great position for the 2026 season.
And it'll be fun to watch them go head to head. It'll be fun to watch Will Power battle the number 12 car, won't it?
Oh, yeah. I cannot wait. Cannot wait.
I know. It's going to be such a fun season. That's not the only news that's happened in the last few days, including some venue news, but let's stick with some driver news, Elijah. News, rumors, the speculation. What's going on?
Well, ever since that Will Power seat has been moved, we've seen VK obviously depart from Dale Coyne Racing, which is a shame because I think Dale Coyne, that organization as a whole, was kind of in the upward trend, and if VK would have stayed, I think it would have been interesting to see how that plays out, but you really can't credit VK for going to find a better seat. And, I think VK in a possible situation where he ends up at AJ Foyt Racing, VK and Santino Ferrucci on ovals, and especially at the Indy 500. I mean, wow, what a lineup that is.
Elijah, I know you're you're pretty young, so you probably don't know some of these names, but I want to go through some of the drivers who started or had part of their career at Dale Coyne Racing and talk about what a boost to a career that can have. And I just want to say that that organization is probably underrated for what it's done through the years. They
Yeah.
had Tony Bettenhausen, clearly that was at the end of his career, but uh, David Malukas, as we mentioned, Buddy Lazier was on that team, Indy
Mm,
500 champion. Alex Lloyd was on Dale Coyne Racing. Mike Conway came from Dale Coyne Racing. Um, Connor Daly obviously had a
yep.
nice start there as well. Santino Ferrucci. This is not a an organization that um, has drivers come and then just go away. They come and they stick around. Alex Zampedri, of course, if you go back through the years, and I'm looking at the list of names. Christian Rasmussen, as we know, was there last year.
Yep.
So a lot of great names involved with that organization, and they go on to be successes.
Yeah, they've really been a staple, like you said, in the IndyCar paddock. As they might not be a team that's going to have uber competitive cars, but from a developmental side and a strategy side, there's nobody who does it better than Dale Coyne. Just the names you read off. I mean, that it's just an incredible list of drivers who have come through that organization.
And I miss Paul Tracy, of course.
Yeah,
So,
Paul Tracy too.
and Elijah, no news at Junko Solinger.
Yeah, no news yet that I've seen. Obviously, they had the driver lineup of Stingray Robb and Connor Daly. I know you and I have been pretty adamant on we'd be pretty shocked if Connor Daly is not in that seat next year. But
And we
I
love
also,
Stingray Robb.
yes, Stingray, yeah, he had a decent season. I think he finished outside the leader
Great
circle, which was kind of,
personality.
yeah, he is a good personality for the sport. And I mean, you just need somebody to read his name one time to never forget him.
That's right.
But I haven't
It's
heard
his
any
real
news on
name, by
that
the way.
side. Yeah, it's incredible, incredible. I haven't heard any news, but it'd be interesting to see what happens. Those teams usually don't jump to the bits and sign drivers super early. They're kind of more waiting to see what happens with the rest of the paddock. And I think once we know where VK is going, I think we'll see some of these smaller teams kind of start to solidify their lineups for 2026.
We still don't have a 2026 schedule, Elijah, but we do have a few dates. Kind of weird that it's only a few at this point, right?
Yeah, it is interesting. We also had the race is going to be moved from the streets of Toronto and going to move about 20 miles northeast to the streets of Markham.
Because of the World Cup.
Yeah, obviously Fox has got that deal with the World Cup as well, but um, the streets of Toronto, that race, the streets they go around is mostly around the event center, which IndyCar uses for pretty much a pop-up paddock. They go inside. There's a bunch of stuff in there for fans and everything, and the teams alike. And obviously that space is going to be used during the World Cup. Um, Obviously, the World Cup is a lot bigger than the IndyCar series. World Cup is the biggest sporting event in the world. Um, but I think the streets of Markham race, having a compelling track layout, 12 turns. We have, I think, another double-sided pit lane as well. Have a hairpin that's pretty similar to the hairpin at Long Beach, and it looks like a pretty positive way for them to move. And it also is the city where Honda is located for their Canada base.
No date for Phoenix.
I don't think there is a date for Phoenix yet,
We just
but
really, really hope it's before the 500, right? That's what they need is some dates, some oval dates in particular before the 500. But in general, they just need more dates between the start of the season, March 1st, and the 500.
yeah, you're not wrong. And I'm going to be really interested to see where they place some of these schedules at. Obviously moving Toronto to Markham, and then obviously having Phoenix, and where you're going to put Mexico City. It's going to be interesting to see how they play this out. And regardless, it looks like we're going to get maybe 18 races next year, which would be great.
Yeah, I would like to see it 24, 26.
Yeah.
There are enough tracks around and venues. There are so many good ones that they still aren't using, mostly because they're NASCAR tracks, which is too bad. But it's not bad at all. 18 is not that's a pretty good number, especially as competitive as it's been. It's you just want more, but 18's not bad.
Yeah, you said it perfectly. You do just want more. 17 races this year, ending the weekend of Labor Day. And I know Fox and IndyCar doesn't want to run into football season because that takes away a lot of viewers. But man, it just felt like a quick season.
It does.
IndyCar really hits their stride in the month of May. You have those really fun summer months, and then it feels like it's just an abrupt end every time IndyCar season ends, which is a shame because, I mean, the races were just incredible this year.
It's too bad that more people aren't seeing that it's become one of the best sports in the country, and at least you and I are seeing it. We're talking about it all the time. Elijah, thanks so much again. This was our regularly scheduled IndyCar report, but if anything major happens, and there are still some major news potential out there, we'll be there to talk about it. Thanks, Elijah.
Thank you, Greg. We'll be scouring the internet for any IndyCar news we can find.
Nonstop. Appreciate it.
Thanks, Greg.
The Central Indiana Sports Report is a product of ITG Media, and I love Susie.